Hi, buddy. Jeff Allen here. Just saw a post on LinkedIn. I don't remember the person's name. No, it's Alfredo Spagna. That was a response to Diego Bartolome's post about machine translation. And the specific topic I want to address is the one on how larger, well, any corporation or any company or any institution, I'm going to call them institutions to kind of make it more simple, because it doesn't need to be actually businesses. It can be actually be governments or NGOs too, or nonprofit associations. It can be all of these. How they, a lot of the quality issues are caused by lack of terminology, and then how those content sources become non-compatible with automated translation. Let's say it that way. Uh, that's what you said, Alfredo. Um, and I've worked on the whole machine translation, automated translation, speech translation for 3 decades now, and I've worked with every kind of machine translation engine type you can imagine. So, I mean, back in the day, we were working with, at the beginning, we were talking with rule-based systems and actually knowledge-based systems. I've actually given a talk in 2004 in a localization world about this at Bonn, but I'll just kind of summarize it. Then I got some videos about this. Look at my whole thing: an inward, inbound, outward, outbound translation on my YouTube channel. I mean, I've got just a video just on this topic, and but I've worked on all these rule-based, knowledge-based systems, knowledge-based machine translation, statistic-based machine translation, multi-engine machine translation, hybrid machine translation. Then we got into neural machine translation, and we have all these different names of where you put one system primary to other systems that you make it secondary, or systems. I mean, these can be algorithms, right? They can be processing rules before or after the primary system. I mean, there are different ways to do this. And having done this in text translation and speech translation, now I'm looking at semiotics of image stuff too. So, and gesture translation. So recognition and translation. I mean, you recognize too. So, but I think one of these things that are in the middle of this, I've spent a lot of time, many years, working on the whole vocabulary, custom vocabulary, corporate vocabulary. I don't call it terminology anymore. I actually have a whole video just about why we should not use the word terminology, because you don't get funding when you talk about terminology, because it sounds like a library rat, right? But I talk about corporate vocabulary or institutional vocabulary. It catches more interest, but it's all the same thing, right? It's all the same thing. And and having worked in the whole controlled language and controlled English, controlled French, whatever, all these different approaches, that too, and having lived that, done that, and not done it, and had to do it, and had to make systems that deal with the fact that you can't have it, so you got to fix the problems that you got. This is really an interesting thing about Alfredo, and I really agree with you that this is key. And over the past 8 years, I've actually been working on a lot of terminology. I'll say the word terminology for you, right? These corporate vocabulary concepts, features that help identify this and how to build it and identify them. And then you reuse them across different platforms of all these different language tools, right? I'll call them language tools across the whole thing, because I mean, if you think about it, spell checkers are language tools, and grammar checkers are language tools, and accent reinserters are language tools, because sometimes you get text that doesn't have the accent marks. You got to put them back in. Been doing there and done that too. Then speech. I've spent a lot of time doing the speech stuff too, and all these speech caption, speech to text things are language tools, and all this is affected by whether or not you've got. I'm going to call it named entities. Named entities are the term that I need. It's kind of a geeky name, but it covers everything. All these names. It can be project names, it can be product names, it can be company names, it can be locations, places, street names, state, region, place names, all these things that are specific to certain countries. Um, Not always, but and they're hard to recognize across different languages. So they're called named entities for that purpose, and we can just call them proper nouns, right? Technical terms, whatever you want to call these things. There are a lot of different things they call them, but these are the key problem, and how to find them. I do it, and the whole move into the whole statistical machine translation realm, just we lost that, right? We just lost that boat. And I kept saying, if we don't treat this and deal with this for SMT, statistical machine translation, we're gonna struggle because it will never get it. So then there were attempts to kind of do this post-processing or pre-processing, post-processing with terminology harmonization. They take all the different variants of you get a hyphen or not, and strip it or harmonize it. Get a space or a hyphen, or it's no space or no nothing. What's the one you want to recognize, and what is the one you want? The ones you want to recognize, and what are the ones you actually want to funnel into? That's the one you want to always use. This affects speech and text, right? So and terminology is kind of a tough thing because terminology includes. I mean, people disagree about this. What is terminology? Some people, it doesn't contain any common vocabulary. It should only contain specific vocabulary or named entities for an institution. I don't agree with that because, I agree with it, but I don't because because there are a lot of terms that actually have multiple meanings, even with basic vocabulary can have multiple meanings across, even in certain institutions. So you might use one more than another and not use certain ones. If you think the word volume has a lot of different meanings, and you might in your content only focus on one or two of the many meanings, right? So it kind of really depends. And all this has created a situation where we got into neural stuff, the whole neural machine translation, which made it more fluent, but we still didn't address the problem of named entities for a long time. I've been saying this for, I think, 8 years. But I think the thing that's really key here is it's starting to really get addressed. Because if we can't get the system to recognize these chunks, I call them lexical chunks. That's what I've been calling them for, 20 years. Lexical chunks. If we can't get these lexical chunks to be recognized, and that can be in captions, right? You can even have like a whole thing in the caption, all these webinars and how to do caption editing. They say about how to deal with lexical chunks, which can actually be adverbial phrases, right? As soon as possible is a lexical chunk. It's not really a terminology thing, but it's a lexical chunk that you don't want to split up. And you need to have that together in a caption line, so for it to be recognized, so that it doesn't kind of get separated and the people don't understand what it is, right? So this fits into, it's not terminology per se, but it's terminology. So again, lexical chunks. So all this all this is really important, and we have to deal with the speech aspect of speech to text and text to speech, because it's really affects, and people's names are, the killer. When you're pronouncing a person's name, you're speaking, I see this a lot when you're speaking in English, doing a large meeting, and then someone says a person's name from another language, but pronounces it in the other language, but is speaking in English. That just it just screws up the speech system can't recognize it. And because this system's been built on English, right? And it wasn't built on another language. And there are other things but I've actually seen the opposite, where languages of speech systems for speech or text systems for other languages, when the person speaking, let's say in French, and they're going along, and then they say a term in English. They pronounce it actually in English. They don't change the pronunciation. They don't phonetically change the pronunciation or phonologically change the pronunciation. Sorry. And then they'll say a specific named entity in English and then come back to speaking French fluently. It actually gets it. So there are some interesting things to see. But all this is, all this kind of comes into play. So I don't want to go into all the details of this, but this is kind of what I spend my time doing, right? And as a trained phonetician, I mean, that's what my phonetician, phonologist, that's what my doctoral work was on. My master did a lot more sociolinguistics, but my doctoral work and a lot of my career has been around the rest of dealing with the speech part of it and other things too. I mean, I do a lot of the things of all these different areas of linguistics, but these are the named entities or keywords or terms or corporate vocabulary or whatever you call these things are the key. And I keep saying this over and over again. And I'm glad to see that others are saying this finally as well, so that we can actually address it and stop trying to just feel like this big model, large language model, kind of figure it out. Because it ain't going to figure it out, folks. We got to deal with the fact that these exist and that we need to be able to, I don't want to say tag them, but we need to tag them, right? And we need to find a way to not have to do this manually, right? Or not do it completely manually. There are ways to semi-automate things, right? But if we can't deal with it, and I got a whole nother video on the need for annotation, right? Across all these systems. So, but hopefully that gives a little bit of additional insight on this specific topic of keywords, terminology, and that kind of stuff. Thanks so much.